ICQ Podcast, episode 341, Listener Q&A. Happy New Year to everybody, to all the amateur ham radio enthusiasts out there, and welcome to this, our 343rd episode of the ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast. Supported in this episode by David Pyle, Kilo Whiskey 1 Delta X-Ray, Walter Washburn, Kilo Tango 0 Delta, and our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB is joined by Leslie, Golf 0, Charlie India Bravo, Dan, Kilo Bravo 6, November Uniform, Edmund, Mike 0, Mike November Golf, and Ruth, Kilo Mike 4, Lima Alpha Oscar, to discuss the latest amateur ham radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature, we answer your questions. Well, as always, it's our very kind donors that keep this show advert free and allow us to pay our way, etc. And we'd like to thank the following listeners who donated one-off donations to show their value for the show. So Dave, Kilo Whiskey 1 Delta X-Ray, says, another great year, keep up the good work. So we will do, Dave, many thanks for that. And then Walt, Kilo Tango 0 Delta, says, greetings and my best wishes for improving the propagation in the new year. So I say thank you very much for that, Walt and Dave. Those donations, along with our monthly and annual subscription donors, provide some wonderful base to be able to pay our way and allow you an opportunity to show your value for the show. If you'd like to help out in 2021, all you need to do is visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate. Think about the value you got from the show, maybe the cost of whatever a coffee is or a subscription to a magazine, etc., that you might have had similar experiences here. Select one of the options or make up one of your own, and say whatever you send away is greatly appreciated and helps us, keeps the show advert free and paying our costs to produce the show. Now, talking about the show, let's move on, because we've got a packed show for you this first one of 2021. So we're going to join Martin, Leslie, Dan, Edmund and Ruth to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur ham radio news, including the FCC sets license costs at 160 metres for Germany. As always, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, welcome to episode 341 of the ICQ podcast and tonight's round table. Tonight I'm joined by Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB. Hi Leslie.
Good evening, Martin. It's a good job we don't record the outtakes. Oh boy. Very good evening to everyone. Great to be back on, Martin, and thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it's great. And yeah, well, as I've mentioned before, we never keep the outtakes because, in fairness, we don't want to make people feel bad. We want people to be honest with us. So outtakes go in the bin, apart from the one of you and the chocolate cream egg, which I believe Martin Rothwell has.
Martin, I couldn't possibly comment.
Yeah, I bet you couldn't. We also have, moving across to the other side of the pond, we have Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Hi, guys. How you all doing?
We're doing pretty well, I think. You know, this is going to be the first show of 2021. We're all upbeat, and we'll have a bit of fun one way or the other.
Absolutely.
Back in the UK, Mr. Edmund Spicer's on, M0MMG. Hi, Edmund.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everybody.
Hi, mate. And, I got a Zello call from you Christmas morning that almost fell off my chair when my phone suddenly his voice talking to me. But it was good to hear from you.
Yeah, it's not real radio, though.
No, I know. But at least you was convincing your good lady it was.
I even used Echo Link later that same day, Martin. What is happening to me?
I don't know, mate. I'll have to get you certified. Okay. And back after quite a long absence, we have Miss Ruth Willet, KM4LAO. Hi, Ruth.
Hello. So good to be back. I've missed being here because of class conflicts, and it's good to finally be on break and able to record with everybody.
Yeah, well, we've missed you, but as I've always said, your education is more important than the podcast, and I know you'll join us when you can, which is good news, and thanks for joining us. Tonight also we would have had Mr. Matthew Nasser, M0NJX, but I don't know where Matthew is, so I'm a little bit worried. I'll have to try and track him down over the next couple of days. But as I say, good to have you all with us. And as I say, we're now start with the news stories. Right, first news story. Dan, you slipped this one in a few minutes ago. It was breaking news. The FCC sets amateur radio license fee at $35. Well, that's not a lot. But over to you, Dan.
Well, yeah. So now the story a couple months ago was that they were proposing a $50 license fee, and that was put forth in their notice of proposed rulemaking. ARRL wanted us all to comment on. Well, after nearly 4,000 comments, they've finally decided on a $35 fee instead. And really the story here, and I'll leave it to everybody in the audience to kind of read the actual report in order. But the real story is how they've, in my mind anyway, how they've kind of poo-pooed some of the arguments. For example, we always claim that emergency communications is our big claim to fame, and that's one of the big reasons we shouldn't have to pay a fee. Well, the FCC just sort of blew over that, and there's also another argument that it would discourage young people and from getting into the hobby, and older people who maybe couldn't afford it from continuing as radio amateurs. And again, they just sort of blew that off. They said, well, sorry, that's not what the act says, so we can't. There's nothing we can do about that. So I would encourage everybody who's interested in this topic to actually read the report in order and see what the FCC actually had to say about these things.
Well, as I said, I've said this before, but $35 is $3.50 a year. Now, in fairness, $35 is sort of a Christmas or a birthday present if you can't afford it. If you were somebody who couldn't afford it, you just say to whoever's going to give you a birthday present, give me $35 for my license. But $35 is just a handy talkie, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, that's the cost of a bow thing these days, right?
Yeah, so, if you can't afford $35 for your license, as much as I hate to say it, maybe, you're spending your money in a different way. Maybe amateur radio is not that important to you. What do you think, Ruth?
Yeah, this is definitely interesting news. As Dan pointed out, I think it's rather disappointing they didn't even seem to consider providing an exception for amateur radio in terms of the fee. And the tone of some of what they wrote was definitely interesting. So I guess we'll just have to be more active and show that emergency services and stuff are definitely good use for the community. But in terms of the fee itself, I'm very glad it wasn't 50 because, like you said, 35 really isn't that much money. So personally, I wouldn't particularly mind contributing to help, ensure that staff involvement and stuff is covered and that they can do all they need to do. And I was thinking about it, one of the arguments was, oh, this could harm young people from getting licensed. But A, they could give them a good opportunity to save up and put their money to good use rather than spending on other things. They can save up and spend it for a licensing fee once for life. And if a young person's getting licensed, like myself, I'll be licensed for a very long time. So this is a one-time thing. But I was also thinking it could help provide mentors an opportunity to help young people get licensed. Well, if there's a young person who wants to get licensed and doesn't have the money for that licensing fee, well, you can help them out and give them a good positive start to the hobby.
Right. And on our last show where we discussed this, I offered to actually pay for someone who actually couldn't afford this, for a young person who actually can't afford this. And I'll reiterate my offer again. So please feel free to get in touch with me.
Absolutely. I mean, so many people have paid it forward for me, and yeah, I'll back that up. If anyone needs some help with this, I'd be happy to help.
I'd sit on the other side of the fence on this, boys, and I know and Ruth, sorry, I know you think I'm being really hard on this. The average packet of cigarettes in the UK is £10, which has got to be $10 in the States. If you're smoking 20 a day, you're spending $70 a week on cigarettes. If you're drinking lots of alcohol, it's what you choose to spend your money on. And I know I'm being controversial on this.
You're never controversial, Martin.
Well, what do you think then?
What do I think? Well, I think that the process Dan has described, we will call it a consultation process here, and it does go on. You know, we have Ofcom, and they have a proposal, and exactly the same. That they get feedback from the national body and from radio amateurs. So the process is very similar. The only thing, and I think I picked up on this before, we have a slightly different system here. We used to be charged for our amateur radio license. It wasn't a lot of money. I think when I started, it was about £8, and then went up to over many years. It went up to 15, and then they decided to get rid of it. So all we have to do now is just register online and renew it every 5 years. However, we're not actually paying for a service. So when I'm giving a talk or something, and I hear radio amateurs saying, well, Ofcom should be doing this or Ofcom should be doing that. And I say, well, you're not actually paying them for a service. Where if you pay for a license, well, there's an expectation there, and it's a value to you because you're paying for something. That's my take on that. And I do take what Dan and Ruth are saying, that if we had a young person in the club, that person was just starting out in the hobby, they would find that license fee paid by the club members. We do these things, just to help them up. But as a matter of principle, I think the license should be paid for.
Yeah. Only in fairness, I mean, I'm not that mean, as you say. With a club, if a young member was a member of a club, they would help. You'd help. Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, I've given handy talkies to young members and said, look, there you go. There's your first radio. I even gave one to a student before they were licensed, albeit that I transmitted disabled the transmit on it, but they were listening to 2 meters and 70 sems and were quite excited about it. So, yeah, we're not totally mean on this one. Okay, Edmund, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I don't pay for a licence in the UK simply because Ofcom won't let me. I would quite like to pay an amount in return for some enforcement action and action against non-compliant, noisy, dirty switch mode power supplies. But beyond that, there's nothing I can really add beyond what I said the last time we discussed this topic on the ICQ podcast, other than to paraphrase it by saying, what do I get for my $35 then?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying.
If I'm parting with money, then surely I have a reasonable expectation of service in return.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Well, you know what? The FCC actually addressed that comment too. They said, here's what they wrote. These commenters argue that if the Commission adopts application fees for the service, it should use the fees for the benefit of licensees. For example, by taking more robust enforcement action against unlawful operators. While we appreciate the commenters' diligent advocacy for their service, we remind them that the Commission does not have discretion on how to use application fees, which must be deposited in the U.S. Treasury. So even if we paid $100 a year, according to this act, they couldn't use it to improve their enforcement.
So what do I get for my money then?
All you get is the ability to basically renew your license online, I guess.
I suspect some people listening to this might find that a deeply unsatisfactory answer. I say no more.
Yeah, and so the issue here then is that what needs to happen is that the ARRL or whoever else must really get involved when this kind of legislation is being proposed, so that specific language gets into the legislation that then directs the FCC to do these things. Okay, and unfortunately, this is a case where we're the low man on the totem pole. Amateur radio is not a priority, so somehow we have to make it a priority. And I think that's again the big lesson here is that whatever the ARRL has been doing, it's not been that effective, And yeah, I don't know that it can be more effective, but if so, we got to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, well, I suppose all we can really do for our $35, if I was in the States, which I will be renewing my license in 2021, is say, well, I'm part of a family. I'm a part of a family of license holders, and that's probably all I can say from that one, in fairness. But yeah, I'll be renewing it, Dan. I'm sure they'll send you my renewal notice at some point in time, but I will do it this year.
All right.
Because I need to keep my W9 ICQ, even though I've only used it once or twice, but I need to keep it.
Absolutely.
Moving on to our next news story. A 3,200 kilometre opening on 144 megs in Australia. Edmund, you like these types of stories. Do you want to go first on this one?
This is a particularly noteworthy achievement for several reasons. First of all, in my admittedly limited experience, Whisper Weak Signal Propagation Reporter is a lot harder to do on VHF than it is on HF. If I have heard a whisper signal on HF that has been strong enough for me to hear it by ear, then without exception, I will always have been able to decode it. On 2 meters, out of the 4 or 5 signals that I've ever heard by ear, I've only ever been able to decode one of them. And that was a station in the Netherlands via tropospheric ducting a few summers back. And although you can't have QSOs as such using Whisper because it's a beacon mode, we came close to having a QSO by virtue of both of us decoding the other's signal. But on 2 meters, you do seem to need to have a very high stability and very high clock accuracy as well on your computers compared to operating Whisper on HF. So it seems to me Whisper is harder to do on 2 meters anyway. But then you add into the mix that sporadic E was involved. The higher you go in frequency, the more intense the cloud needs to be to refract your signal at a given frequency. So on 2 meters, some sporadic E openings can last a matter of tens of seconds. Okay, during the summer of 2020, there was one in particular from the UK down to Italy that lasted several hours, but that is certainly the exception rather than the rule. So you would need a sporadic E cloud, but not just 1, 2, in order to produce the distance covered. The furthest you can get on a single hop normally is taken to be somewhere around 1,500 miles. The distance covered here is closer to 2,000 miles. So the thinking is that there are 2 clouds involved because there wasn't any tropospheric ducting around as per the Hepburn forecast. There was certainly no reflection off the International Space Station because apart from anything else, that would introduce Doppler shift that would, in all likelihood, completely screw up reception of the Whisper signal. So there were 2 sporadic E clouds involved, and the thinking is that it was a caudal hop. So in other words, ground to cloud 1 to cloud 2 down to ground, rather than 2 separate bounces from the Earth. That would introduce a huge amount of signal loss. But even so, if you add all of those things in the mix to have 2 clouds in the right place at the right time, with people at both ends pointing their antennas in the right direction, and for all of that to come together, even allowing for the fact that there is quite an active 2 meter Whisper Facebook group for Australia. I don't think there's an equivalent for the UK or for Europe, by the way, so if I'm right about that, maybe somebody listening who knows how to set up Facebook groups might want to consider starting one. But even leaving that coordination aside, to get all of that to come together, that takes some doing, and I reckon it will be quite a while before anybody replicates that, let alone beats it. So congratulations to all involved. I've looked up on qrz.com, and I know that one of the transmitting stations has a tower with quite a long-looking Yagi on it. I don't know about the person at the other end. It didn't actually show a photo of his antenna system. And I think they were running 10 watts. Often Whisper is transmitted using milliwatts rather than watts. You can transmit it at high power because it's a weak signal mode as opposed to a low power mode. But even if it's 10 watts into 2 Yagis with serious amounts of gain, that is still an enormous distance to cover in the circumstances. And if they were running it at 10 dBm relative to a milliwatt, that would be 10 milliwatts. That would be absolutely outstanding. So I assume that the figure 10 that we see in the show notes means that they were running 10 watts rather than 10 milliwatts. But my mind is sufficiently blown, Martin, and many congratulations to all involved.
I thought you'd like that one. It's your part of the hobby, really, isn't it? The long distance and VHF. Leslie, you don't do much VHF, do you? You're more of an HF man. But what's your thoughts?
I like playing HF because that's sort of my initial training on the old Klansman kit. So if for people that remember that stuff, it's sort of green stuff that breaks your back as you're carrying it. But I've just been looking at this. Absolutely incredible. I mean, I play a little bit of Whisper. I've got one of these little boxes. But I'm just looking at... There's a site... Let me just have a look at this. The site, EI7GL Blogspot. Sorry, I'll say that again. It's EI7GL Blogspot.com. And it goes over the information and the achievements that Edmund's been describing. And there's the discussion, as Edmund's gone into, about actually how this contact could occur. I find it absolutely amazing, and it really is beyond what I normally do. So, well, hats off to them.
It's another one of those. Let's see what amateur radio can do. Ruth, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think absolutely incredible is a good way to sum it up. I greatly enjoyed reading about this. Very, very fascinating. I mean, I think Edmund and Leslie have pretty much covered what I was going to mention, but like just the amount of distance and how everything came together so well to get multiple hops through significantly ionized clouds is just awesome. So it's really, really cool that this was able to happen and that they were able to decode the signal so well to figure out where it came from.
Yeah, sounds good. Dan, do you think it might be anything to do with the fact that we got more people sort of sitting at home at the moment, or could there be changes happening on the planet that are giving us all these long distance contacts? Because we've certainly noticed quite a few of them at VHF, haven't we?
Yeah, I'm tending to think more that there's more people at home trying this stuff now. But I think that this points out how cool all this weak signal stuff is. Everybody's sort of proclaimed, K1JT, right? I mean, he's a Nobel Prize winner, and all that. But without him, we wouldn't have this, right? I mean, he's the one that did all this low weak signal work in the first place, and so we got to give him credit for all these new records that are being broken because it's his software that's doing it.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Dan, because, as I say, that's the other thing about our hobby. It is migrating continually, and Joe Taylor's software has been an absolute godsend to a lot of people, and it does change, our perception of what things could be. I mean, gone are the days when you tell students that VHF and UHF are line of sight.
Oh, that's gone out the window, Martin, totally.
I think it has. I think we have to say VHF and UHF are predominantly line of sight. However, it can happen. And it's certainly, it makes our hobby more interesting. There's a UK story that's come up. Ofcom have just released new licence totals for the time period between the 1st of March and the 30th of November 2020. 3,619. Now, Ruth did ask me, she said, well, what does that actually equate? Is it up or down or whatever? I believe it's about twice what it would normally have been. So what's your thoughts, Ruth?
I'm really glad to hear that it's about twice what it normally had been. So great that there's been this increase in licenses during the pandemic, and that, we've been able to adapt and figure out a way to get and keep people interested in the hobby and help them, take tests online or social distance or whatnot as protocols needed. So it's really good that they were able to get this many people licensed, and as always, hopefully we can continue to get them active in the hobby and on the air as soon as possible.
Well, I'm glad we're getting, we're topping up the hobby. We have a natural attrition, unfortunately, but we're certainly topping it up, certainly in the UK and I'm sure in the States. Dan, I know it's a UK story, but any thoughts on this one?
Well, so what I wonder here is whether it's a matter of people, and it's probably a combination of both, a matter of people being at home or an elimination of your practicals. Now that obviously they can't do that online, so maybe that elimination has made the process easier so that more people were able to get licensed. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, when Leslie and I did ours, and I'll talk for Leslie for a second, when we did ours, the RAE exams, they were pure theory. You never ever had to go at practical. You weren't allowed on the air. Technically, you were only allowed to send one greetings message per contact. So if Leslie had been in contact with you, he could have passed the mic on, hi, Dan, how you doing, blah, 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 and that would have been it. If you'd have come back with questions, technically I wasn't supposed to answer your questions. So, so that was how tough our licenses were back then. And, it was pure technical. I still like the fact that we had practicals because it was a good icebreaker for people and they actually got to see. But I'm sure we all remember the first time, we went on air. For our own first contact we ever made. It's a difficult one. We're all mic shy. Aren't we, Leslie?
Me, Martin, mic shy, of course. I remember somebody putting a microphone in front of me. It's like, hey, would you like to do a podcast, Leslie? Well, do you remember that, Martin?
Oh, nothing to do with me, Squire. Nothing to do with me, honest.
Seriously though, Martin, this is good news. I know things are a bit grim at the moment with what's occurring on other things. One of the things that this is bringing about is a huge use in technology. Things like Zoom meetings. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal. Increase in amateur radio. That's got to be good news. Now, I understand about the practicals and I understand about their importance. Because when we did it, I think there was the RAE, and then you had the Morse test that entitled you to go on to HF. Things have changed now. I mean, then you could, I remember one guy spent £4,000 at the time, that was 1980s, and he then he passed the exam and he said, Leslie, can you put my station together for me? And I went, no, I'll help you put your station together. This isn't the idea. It's about self-training. And he said, no, I don't want to bother about that. And I just found that a bit irksome. But I think this is having unintended consequences upon use of technology, which is a really, really good thing. I mean, we got WhatsApp groups down the local street and everything. Now, that is unthinkable years ago, but it's all good. Like I said, we're getting more people into amateur radio, which is good. What can I say, Martin?
Well, I agree with you. There's a lot going on amateur radio. And yeah, I think now, and I've said this before, I've been in agreement with the RSGB who are trying to do something along these lines of helping new people into the hobby, getting them on board. I spend as much time as I can. If I hear an M7 call sign, which is a brand new foundation license holder in the UK, I'll invariably try and work them. And I think, we should also, help. But guys, this is the other thing I will say, is just because somebody's new into the hobby doesn't mean to say they're a complete muppet. There are people sometimes that have been around electronics, been around radio, even designed radio for a living, that have never had an amateur license. And suddenly they get a foundation license. Doesn't mean, they probably could. They technically could, no.
But Martin, you're absolutely right there, because what some radio amateurs do is they look at a new licensee and they make assumptions about that person's background. And that's actually quite wrong, because like you're saying, people have got lots and lots of different backgrounds. I mean, my background was military comms many years ago and then engineering. So that wasn't a problem for me. But different people, different backgrounds, they've all got different things to contribute to the hobby. That's the way I look at it, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, certainly has, and I agree. Edmund, hopefully we haven't covered everything off and left you nothing to say, but what's your thoughts?
Well, it's good news. The only observation I would make is that because we've got this figure, it doesn't mean that there's that number of people who've newly entered into the hobby. Since lockdown started in March 2020, I've heard an awful lot of people on the air saying, I got licensed in the 1970s or 80s or whenever, but then I let my license lapse, and they've reapplied for it since lockdown, now that they've got an awful lot more spare time on their hands. And also, somebody could, I suppose, theoretically have passed their foundation, intermediate and full all in the same year, in which case they would use up 3 license allocations whilst only being one person. But even if you take all of that into account, yes, there's clearly an upward trend. And I'm glad to see that the new people coming into the hobby. I just hope that they will, most or all of them, will be active people, Martin. Because I think I've said this to you before. Personally, I would rather have 10 new licensees who went on the air and did stuff than 100 new ones who only turned their radio on once in a blue moon and who most of the time you wouldn't even know were there. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I agree 100% with what you said then. The object is, as Dan would say from a Morse code point of view, get on the air. That's right.
Get involved. Get involved.
That's what I do. That's what I say.
Yeah. Get on the air. And it works for all of our hobby, but yeah, we need you. We need you, and we need you to enjoy the hobby. Right, I'm sure Ed Durant's going to be sitting here when he listens to this on Sunday morning saying, that's another licensee story that I could have commented on that Martin didn't invite me to, but it's just the way they come up, Ed. I don't stitch you up, honest. Germany has got a temporary license for 160 metres. It's an extension to that 160 metre ban. And I just thought everybody had top band. I was quite surprised. And I know, I appreciate the discussion. You were too, weren't you, Ruth? What do you think of this one?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I literally didn't realize that everyone didn't have permanent licensing privileges on 160 meters since, I really haven't had the chance to study the band plans much for other countries. If nothing else, this story has piqued my interest into studying all the other countries and seeing which ones have privileges where, especially for top band. 160 meters is awesome to use here in the US. So I'm thrilled that the temporary license for Germany has been extended through the end of 2021, I think. And hopefully enough hands use it, and maybe they can get some permanent licensing privileges there.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it is strange, and I know that Our 80 metre band in the UK is from 3.5 to 3.8 megs. Yours is from, I think, 3.5 to 4 megs, if I remember right. And you guys in the States call it the 80 and the 75 metre band. Am I right?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. So there are differences around the world, and I suppose if you're going to try and work a DX, somebody on DX, you've got to know where they're going to be, I suppose, which is a good call, Ruth. Good call. Dan, what's your thoughts?
Well, yeah, like Ruth, I was surprised about that. And there's a line here at the bottom of the story. It says the same official journal also contains extensions of temporary licenses for the ranges to the 2 gig band, the 5 gig band, 50 to 52 megahertz, and 70.15 to 70.2 megahertz. So, it's more than just the 160 meter band. I guess they don't have permanent privileges on 2 gigs and 5 gigs, and that lower portion is 6 meters. That's kind of weird too.
Yeah, well, 50 to 52 megs, 6 meters is what we use in the UK. We don't have to 54 megs like you do in the States. But it's quite interesting. I was talking to Ed the other week, and some of these frequencies, they're not allowed to use mobile or portable. They have to be operated from their home location. I think the 4 meter band one, if I remember right, Ed, what you were telling me, is that you have to be at home to operate it. So there's lots of strange regulations around the world for different hams in different countries.
Well, we don't have 4 meters here at all.
No. It's probably because you might have had VHF television there or close to it or something, I would guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. We don't now, though, so we should get it.
Yeah, I mean, we only got 6 meter band. I think, and Leslie probably correct me on this, back in the 80s when we stopped band 1 or the VHF television, the 405 line television system, black and white television system, finally went off air. Isn't that right, Leslie?
Yeah, it's something like that, Martin. But I was going through the document, and I saw something that I sort of fell off my chair. And it's under the notes, and it said in the frequency ranges 18 to 50 to 18 to 90 and 1890 to 200 kilohertz. The use of maximum transmit power of 750 watts PEP, and I'm sort of paraphrasing, shall be permitted at the weekends. And I'm thinking, on those frequencies, we were lucky we got 20 watts out.
Yeah, that is funny too. They only are allowed that on the weekends.
Yeah, we had a KW2000A with 30-foot of wire slung out the window, and you got a voltage shock off the radio because the earthing was so awful.
Yeah, but that's what made it interesting, Leslie, wasn't it?
Well, to be honest, I didn't know what I was doing at the time.
You're not supposed to own up to that, Leslie. Oh, dear. But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. What's it? The Class A license, 750 watts. If you're a Class E license, I believe it's 100 watts. So yeah, it's interesting. And yeah, sorry, Ed, it came up outside of your rotation. So there we go.
Do they actually have 5 different license classes there still?
I'm not sure it's a truthful answer. I'm truthfully not sure. Ed would have been able to tell us.
But one thing that this does show is that it's a knowledge of the international band plans. If you want to work people from different countries, the band plans are not all fully aligned. They may be slightly out, so you'll get one particular country in a particular frequency appropriate to their license, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's why we had to operate split on some stations in the States, don't you?
Yeah.
Edmund, what's your thoughts on this one?
Rather a stranger to the 160 meter band, because although I could cobble together an antenna to transmit after a fashion, there's so much noise around that the band is virtually unusable. I just wouldn't hear anybody replying to me. and that's even during the times of the year when we haven't got all the fairy lights and Christmas decorations up that we've got at the moment. But I did know that top band was not a worldwide allocation, and that there are, even to this day, some restrictions in some countries. The one that sticks in my mind from years gone by is Japan. Decades ago, if indeed not still today, the band was very narrow, and there were gaps in it, I think, so that if you wanted to work Japan from the UK, you had to operate split within the band. So, yeah, I knew it wasn't a worldwide allocation in the way that some other HF bands are, but I assumed that Germany just had the allocation as a matter of course. I didn't know it was on a sort of rolling renewal basis. So that was a bit of a surprise, but I'm glad that they've got it, obviously. Regarding 6 metres, 405 line TV at VHF closed down in 1985. So the 6 metre band necessarily was introduced at some point after that to the population in general. I think I'm right in saying for the first couple of years it was only available to Class A licensees, and it then subsequently was released to the Class B licensees, so the VHF brigade could use 6 metres. And for 4 metres, what you said, yes, that is correct. In Germany, there are power limitations. You can't take it out portable, and you have to be horizontally polarised as well at the German end. That's not a major problem when you're working Germany via short skip sporadic E, because the signals do tend to get a bit mangled in the ionosphere anyway. But certainly at the German end, yes, you must be horizontally polarised. And I think, did Ed say there's a 25 watt ERP limit? I'm struggling to remember now. Sorry, Mr. Durant, you can put me right next time. So, yeah, and after that collection of random thoughts there, back to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems. Well, as we said, it's an interesting. It's highlighted more than Germany that if you are looking to work DX and you are after a specific country, it may be worth looking up the band plan for that country to try and find out where the amateurs are going to be. So, good call. Okay, FCC starts crackdown on pirate radio landlords.
Oh,
yes. So, Dan, being in the States, and I know you weren't very impressed with this story, were you?
I'm tempted to pass this on to Ruth, but I'll go. So this is interesting to me because A, I don't know how the FCC can actually prove this, and B, I don't know that it's up to the landlords to, I don't know that this is any concern of theirs, right? I mean, if the FCC, first off, the FCC will have to have determined that a pirate radio station is operating on a certain property, and if they can do that, then they can, do whatever it takes to shut that radio station down. Have a search warrant, blah blah blah, whatever it is. So I'm kind of like, I don't like this. I just don't think, and I'm not a big like personal rights kind of guy, but to me, this just seems like an overreach, from a legal point of view.
Yeah, we were talking in the pre-show, and I said my visit to Chicago last year, and I was down in the center of Chicago. Suddenly in front of me is this massive building with Trump written on it. Regardless of politics, there's this building with Trump written on it. Massive, 30, 40, 50-story building. Now, if I manage to con my way onto the roof by whichever means, and I put up an illegal transmitter on that roof, Donald Trump would be the landlord. It's his building. But as sure as eggs is eggs, he ain't going to go on the roof. He's not going to check this, that, and the other. He's going to employ somebody, either a maintenance team for that building or a contract maintenance team that will go around and check. And chances are, if you're a contract maintenance team, you ain't going to know whether that bit of wire was put up by an official contractor or whatever. You might not even spot the bit of wire that's been put up on the roof. So it's an interesting one, in my opinion. I just don't know if it's fair. If you're renting space to a pirate radio station and you know about it, yeah, good on the FCC. But the other thing is, chances are you wouldn't know.
Right. Like Joe Pirate Radio Station isn't going to have that as his company name. He's not going to sign, the contract as being Joe Pirate Radio Incorporated.
No, of course he isn't.
He's just not going to know.
Yeah. dodgyfm.com.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, that was quite polite for me.
No, okay, Martin, do you want me to take you up on that one?
Go on then.
Okay, I appreciate different legal things in different countries, and they may look at things sort of differently. But here, it's the property owner is responsible. Now, yeah, you're right. He's got a maintenance team on top of the roof, and they're not going to know about this, that, and the other. They really haven't got a clue because they're there to look after the what's the word? Look after the air conditioning unit, say. But what would happen is that the FCC would send a notice to inform them that this is happening on their property, and oh, really? I didn't know anything about that. And then hopefully the owner would do something about it. I think that's the intention. Where before the owner could say, "Well, no, I really don't care because I don't know nothing about it." Well, no, because we've sent you a notice, and I think this is what they're aiming at. Whether it's actually going to be effective or not, bearing in mind that transmitters are for pirate radio stations are pretty much sacrificial in any way. Once they've traced the transmitter, the DJ they're long gone because they feed into it remotely. So, is it going to be effective? Unquestionable on that one. Personally, I think no. But hey, that's only my take. Over to you, Martin.
Yeah, I think we're agreed on this one. Edmund, what's your thoughts on pirate radio and landlords getting into trouble for this?
Well, the word that I think is going to be the clincher in this article is knowingly. I've never been involved in pirate radio because I'm not brave enough, apart from anything else. But in the late 2000s, in the late 1990s, I was at university in southwest London, and at that moment, literally every spot on the FM dial that didn't have a legal broadcaster on it had a pirate radio station, and sometimes they were less than 100 kilohertz away from a legal broadcaster, so you couldn't tune across the dial without being aware of pirate radio stations, whether you actually wanted to listen to them or not. And there were a number of documentaries on TV at the time in the London area that I did watch. And typically what you would do, unless you were extremely brazen or stupid, you wouldn't have the transmitter in the same location as your studio, because your studio, your turntables, your record collection, as it was in those days, it would always be worth far more than the transmitter and the antenna. So what you would do is, as Martin's already mentioned, is you would have your studio in one location, and then you would have a link, usually in the microwave bands. Although having said that, there was at least one pirate station that had its studio to transmitter link on I think about 52 point something megahertz, so just above the 6 meter band in Europe and within the 6 meter band in the USA. So once Solar Cycle 25 gets going, if you listen, if the maximum usable frequency goes high enough, if you're in the States and you listen between 52 and 54 megs in wide FM, you might hear studio to transmitter links from the UK, if there are still any out there, most of which will probably be legal and licensed, some of which might not be, if you're into real long-distance pirate radio DXing. But apart from that, yes, it was mostly done at microwave frequencies. And as Martin has said, the transmitter was almost sacrificial. So in a way, it would be better if the FCC could go after the studio location rather than the transmitter location, although I appreciate there are technical difficulties with doing that. But they're going after the transmitters, and this is for radio broadcasting. We aren't talking pirate, amateur, or CB, or family radio service, GMRS, MURS transmissions, that kind of thing. We're talking broadcast radio here. 100 megahertz slap bang in the middle of the FM band is 3 meters as a wavelength, so only half as big again as a 2 meter amateur radio antenna. Us amateurs know you can be very stealthy with VHF antennas if you want to be, and this is, I think, perhaps where the problem is, because if the FCC writes to me saying we believe there is an FM transmitter illegally on top of your tower block, do something about it in 10 days, I send somebody up on the roof to have a look round who isn't a radio enthusiast, doesn't necessarily know exactly what he's looking for or looking at. If I've put an antenna up there stealthily so it doesn't stick out, if I've been careful to hide the actual transmitter unit by, I don't know, sticking it down a lift shaft or behind the back of something and covering it up with, I don't know, a dark covering of some kind so that it's not easy to see. If that person takes a look around the roof, says, well, I can't see anything up here, it looks legit to me, Gov. And as a result, I write back to the FCC to saying, dear FCC, I have sent a man or a lady up on the roof and practiced due diligence. As far as I can see, there ain't nothing up there, Gov. Can't help you. Thank you very much. Goodbye. What happens then?
That's a good question.
And off one final comment, and I know I've been talking a lot, so I'll be quiet now, I promise. From an purely amateur radio point of view, I hope that this won't have unintended consequences, because if I lived in a tower block and I either had a VHF antenna on the roof or was thinking of asking my landlord permission to put one up there, I think I would be feeling quite concerned at this point. Back to you, Martin.
Or if there was a repeater up on the roof, repeater station up on the roof.
Yeah, they certainly do put repeaters on high buildings, as we well know. Did it in central London a few years ago. And yeah, that was an interesting installation. Ruth, would you like to have the last words on this one?
I mean, I think everybody pretty much covered what I was going to go with. So I think we're all pretty much in agreement here. I don't have too much to add. It definitely is an interesting stretch on like who they're going after, but maybe this will be a good initiative for landlords to check their properties and, hire good contractors to check their properties for them and ensure that they aren't, being used for illegal transmitting or whatnot.
Oh, that's what we need to do, but that's good. Okay, well, we'll see what the FCC does, and we'll have to see how it pans out, guys. This is just the notice they're going to do it. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, Martin, I think you're right. We just see what happens, see how this pans out.
I'll keep on top of this and report on it later.
Lovely. Right, our last news story, radio amateurs licenses, or number of radio amateurs are declining in Japan, and it's continuing to decline. Now, Leslie, you wanted better figures on this, and I can't give you the figures for it, but yeah, it's dropping quite significantly, I would suggest. What do you think?
Yes, Martin. Okay, I'm putting my engineering hat on now. So I actually, when I was trying to make sense of the figures, that there is a decline. However, the way the figures are presented, it is what I would call raw data. And you really need to sort of take that raw data and to put it in a graphical form so you can actually see what's occurring, to try and work out trends from just a mass of numbers. And I think it's more difficult, and you need to sort of a visual thing to what's actually occurring. There is definitely a decline. What that rate of decline is over what time period, again, some of the things aren't very clear in there. Maybe something got lost, but I'm just trying to make sense of the data. It is concerning, but the question is, I would say, why is this occurring? What questions should we ask about the data? I would not put opinions on. That's your own personal things. Just put that to one side. It's trying to analyze what the data is telling us, and at the moment that's a little bit difficult, in my view.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, as you say. But the one that really jumped out and hit me, over 90% of all Japanese amateur radio license holders are Class 4 license holders.
Yeah.
And this was introduced in 1950, even before I was born, Leslie. But in fairness, the Class A license permits the following, and I'm not going to read it all out, but the most important ones for us amateurs are 10 watts on top band, 80 meters, 40 meters, 15 meters, 12 meters, and 10 meters, and 20 watts on 6 meters, 2 meters, 70 sems. Now, that's QRP. I could be putting my neck on the block here, but I'm sure that the main reason the ICOM 703, which is a really nice QRP rig, was probably produced because if you've got 90% of your license holders in Japan are QRP operators, you've got a big market.
Yes, I fully agree.
Yeah, and that could be the reason why, in the nicest possible way, everybody's getting excited about an ICOM 705, but I'm damn sure they'll sell far more in Japan than they'll ever sell throughout Europe because of the number of license holders in Japan and the fact that most of them are QRP operators. So if we continue to get license degrading and people leaving the hobby, maybe the sort of rigs we're going to get offered in the future, like the 705 or the 703, might not, or even, dare I say it, and I don't know this from Yasu's point of view, maybe the 817 and 816, maybe we wouldn't get those if there wasn't a big Japanese market. Don't know. It's just another thought on.
I take what you're saying, Martin, and I do see that. Manufacturers look at their markets and design products accordingly to fit those markets and to fit their needs. I mean, that's perfectly normal. The question I would say is, okay, there's been a decline. What is that, a decline, or is it part of a natural churn? What is the normal churn rate of people coming into the hobby then leaving the hobby? And that's why the plotting of this data becomes very, very important to actually see what's occurring. Yes, it is a concern, but again, I'd like to emphasise what's the reasons behind it.
Yeah, I agree with you. You've gone more for the true part of the story of that there's a decline, but there isn't enough really numbers to give you an overall picture. I've gone off a little bit of a tangent, thinking this has other effects on the hobby long term.
Yes.
So
and that equipment naturally it goes to Japan and then is modified for the American market and modified for the European market. So there's a knock-on effect to the equipment we get in the long run.
Certainly is. Ruth, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think the two of you again have kind of covered the two good points of view that I was seeing this from. I'm definitely more of the it's disheartening that the numbers are declining in Japan, but I'm also like, all they gave us was the data. I'm really curious the background as to why, and like one of you mentioned, kind of, is this natural turnover? Like, what about the number of people coming into the hobby? Do we have the same amount? I'm just interested in just the information behind the numbers as to why it's declining so much, in addition to just the raw data.
It's an interesting one, Ruth. I don't think we'll ever have the full answers to these, but it's worth looking at them. And yeah, I mean, everybody these days has a mobile phone. In the 1950s, you were either a landline, or if you were an amateur, you were somebody a bit different, a bit special. You know, nowadays everybody can do it with a mobile phone, or they believe they can. Put it that way. So yeah, maybe that's the decline. Dan, what's your thoughts?
Well, you know, so I've taken a look at the AH0A statistics on Japanese licenses, and he only goes up to 2014, which is kind of odd. But the in the late 90s, or throughout the 90s, the number of amateurs there was over 1 million, and I think I'm going to have. Unfortunately, we don't have any. We need a Japanese commentator.
Yeah, I did check that, Dan, and it went up to 1.3 million.
Yeah, it was the largest report number here is 1,364,316 in 1995. So the question is, well, why did it get so large? And then what happened to all the folks that were hams? You know, why did they quit? And maybe it's because they were restricted to QRP. You know, I mean, seriously, you know, QRP is fun and all, but you very few people can only do QRP, right? So anyway, it would be interesting. I'm going to have to email this guy here, JH3XCU, and see what he has to say about this. Maybe he's got more insight into this.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see a follow-up on this one, Dan. So, yeah, that'll be good. Edmund, last words on this one?
Well, at the risk of sounding terribly unhelpful, I can't think of anything else to add, Martin. Sorry.
Well, I know we probably killed it off. It wasn't a strong news story to start with. But yeah, I think we just got to watch this space. Well, that concludes the news stories. Now I need to find out what the guys have been up to, amateur radio-wise, since the last time we spoke. Leslie, have you been behaving yourself?
Of course, Martin. I've been working. To be honest, I've done very little on the radio amateur side at the moment. Just pottering about with bits and pieces. Yeah, testing some equipment. That's all. Not very much at all. Been chock-a-block with night shift and work. So not very much to report on this end. Sorry.
Well, it's been a busy time, and the run-up to Christmas is always other pulls on our time. Edmund, what have you been up to?
Well, I was just wondering that myself, and with the exception of working you over Zello, and although it's internet end-to-end, we still gave our call signs at regular intervals, didn't we? Old habits die hard. With the exception of that on Christmas Day, I honestly think I haven't done any amateur radio at all since we last spoke, other than I've been working from home since March 2020, and my office is also where my VHF station is, upstairs. And during my lunch breaks and coffee breaks, I have a scanner which I switch on. So I've been keeping quite a close ear on the local VHF, UHF chat channels and repeaters. And I've certainly heard a lot of people. So I have the scanner going during coffee breaks and at lunchtime. And even in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've probably heard 2 or 3 people, if not more, mention that they were licensed decades ago and they let it lapse. And other things like real life got in the way. But now that lockdown is happening, they've got more spare time on their hands, so they've reactivated their license. They've got in contact with Ofcom and they've been able to do the business. So there are quite a few people out there whose call signs I've heard on my little Uniden Bearcat scanner, but I haven't actually worked them on the air yet. So I suppose you could say I've been listening rather than transmitting, which is really bad, isn't it? I didn't pass my licenses just to be a licensed listener, really. Having said that, though, Amberley Museum has closed for the winter season, but we were planning to reopen once January rolled round on the 6th of January, I think it was. That's not now going to happen because of the new Tier 4 COVID restrictions. So, for the third time, I'm sorry to say that the club call sign will be going on the air, and it will be going on the air from my home. So if you are in Europe and if you hang out on 40 metres SSB, typically above 7.1, then please do listen out for Golf X-Ray 3 Whiskey Mike uniform. But apart from that, Martin, I'm really struggling to think or remember. I honestly don't think I have done any amateur radio since the last time we spoke. That's terrible, isn't it, Martin? What is happening to me? Back to you.
I think you need to report to the hospital and get checked out, mate. Oh, sorry. Yeah, well, we've been busy. You are doing radio, and it has been a bit of a strange time over the last few days. I know what it's like. Dan, what have you been up to since the last time we chatted?
Well, I got a couple of things to report. First off, I've been accepted to speak at the next QSO Today virtual ham conference. So I'm working on the presentation for that. And secondly, you guys might get a kick out of this, but I actually set myself up and made a few FT8 contacts.
Ooh.
I know. I figured I needed something new to do, so I figured out how to set up the Flex here to make and work with WSJTX, and made some FTA contacts. Made a couple of DX contacts in the Europe and a couple around the US. One I was really geeked for. The call sign was KH2GM, and KH2 is the prefix for Guam. And I'm thinking, oh man, this guy's in Guam. Well, it turns out he's in Alabama, so it really wasn't big DX. But then what happened here is, a couple of days ago, I turned on the Flex and decided it didn't want to turn on. So I don't know. I'm working on trying to get that fixed. Flex actually has some pretty good technical support, and they're sending me out a new SD card which contains the firmware. They think it might be corrupted firmware, but so that's good. At least I won't have to send it back. But that's just part of what I've been doing. That's enough, I think.
Well, to use the term Bill Mira uses as solder smoke, looks like the radio gods have not been with you on your Flex.
No.
But hey, it gets to us. Ruth, been a long time. You must have had a few things you've been up to. What have you been up to?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely been a few months since I've been on the show because of classes that got scheduled at the same time. But I've been staying as active as I can around senior year of undergrad, which has been a good challenge. I think the biggest thing throughout the last couple of months, I've been working with a number of students at Kettering. We've been going through and learning all the technician class material. I've been going through it all virtually with them, piece by piece, and explaining stuff, and starting to take practice exams and stuff. So we've got a number of kids that are really interested. So we're going to be continuing this into the new year, and hopefully we'll be helping them register to take the exam very soon. So I'm really excited about that. It's been good for me stretching my instructor skills and stuff, which has been great. I've also been on satellite sporadically around my class schedule. I was able to get up to Traverse City, Michigan for a little personal getaway in November, and I brought my satellite gear, so I got to do a satellite pass from
Awesome.
shores of the lake, which was very cold and very wet, but very fun. And then I've also been on HF once I got home the last couple of days, operating as Kilo 8 Alpha and Kilo 8 Yankee for the Yoda month. So I am in the process of purchasing a new NVED antenna for myself for portable stuff, and it's easy to put up at where I live during my co-op. So that's hopefully going to come in the next week or so, because my current one is on its last legs. So hopefully I can get on HF a little bit more during my last co-op term. So I've been staying busy. It's been good.
Yeah, it does sound like you've been busy. Well, that's all good news. Okay, well, I did a bit as well. I left my hotspot on Michigan one night and came down early hours of the following morning to see that certain Mr. Dan Romanchik had been on DMR. Who says you don't do VHF?
Well, yeah. So fortunately, our repeater now is back on the Brandmeister network. There was a bit of a problem with it, and they've upgraded the computer system now, and our repeater is back on the Brandmeister network. And if anybody wants to talk, just I'm sometimes will monitor talk groups 3126, which is the Michigan statewide talk group, and 312654, which is the local Ann Arbor talk group.
Yeah. Well, I might catch on one of those, Dan, at some point in time. I know we got quite a big time difference, and I'm grateful for you and Ruth for tipping up at a sensible, reasonably sensible time, so we can do these. The other thing, I had an email just before we started from Ed Durant. Said that George and Jeremy from Ham Radio 360 Workbench Podcast wish all the ICQ presenters a Happy New Year. And I'd like to say that I'd like to return that to George and Jeremy. But also, I think I'd like to extend it to all podcasters that are out there. You know, a lot of the people I meet at rallies sometimes think that we're at war. Each podcast is stabbing the other one in the back to get to the top, and the war in it. None of us, I believe, are. We'll openly admit that not everybody's going to like all the content from every podcaster, and some won't personally get on. But majority of us do actually get on and are very helpful to each other. And in which case, I'd like to wish all the podcasters a very happy new year. Keep on doing what you're doing, because in fairness, we're actually keeping the hobby alive, and there are people that rely on our content every episode to keep them abreast of what's going on. I also bought myself another DVM hotspot, and I was playing with that over the Christmas period. So I've now got two hotspots, but this one is going to be a mobile one, so I can take on holiday or take to work or whatever, if need be. I know it's not real radio, boys, but hey, it works for me. My good lady, Mrs. B, bought me a Yaesu FT70D for Christmas. Looks a lovely piece of kit. Unfortunately, mine was faulty. 3 days I've been messing around with it, trying to get it to communicate with the USB port. The radio itself works perfectly okay. RF-wise, you can program it from the front panel. I can't program it from the USB port. I've done all the usuals by resetting. I've tried 3 computers. I've tried 2 programming leads. I think it's a fault on the radio. Sorry, let's face it, it should be commercial grade electronics. You're not supposed to be a whiz. You should just plug it in. It should work. But it doesn't. It just says that the device fails in Windows every time you plug it in. So that will be going back to the dealer fairly soon. Had lots of VHF and UHF operating. Enjoyed that. Both DMR and analog. I've also done some HF operation. QRP from my work location. QRP, just over a week ago, I had a couple of reasonable contacts into Bosnia and Croatia. And a gentleman in Bosnia was absolutely gobsmacked when I told him I was running 10 watts into a halfway 120 metres with a match at the bottom. And but the thing was, he was listening. I get on my soapbox on this. I was hearing all sorts of stations on that day. I heard the states quite clearly. I'm running 10 watts. I'm sure some of the guys are running 1.5 kilowatts. So, yeah, I could hear them. They weren't listening enough to hear me. But the guy in Bosnia and the guy in Croatia were over the moon when I told them I was running 10 watts. So that was a good one for me. And the last thing I got to say is, and this is a thought for all of us for the new year, not just the presenters, everybody. I'm seeing a certain amount of radio hatred. And what I mean by that is we posted a wish everybody a happy new year, all radio operators from the ICQ podcast. And there was a very venomous reply came back from one person. It was taken down by the moderator fairly quickly. And I think, guys, we have to realise our hobby is radio. We do one part of that radio called amateur radio. There is nothing wrong with the people that want to do CB or license-free PMR 446 in the UK or family service wherever you are or whatever. We all want to do radio. So why do we have to fight each other? Yeah? That's where I'm coming from. So I really think that, that we've got to get past the hatred and move on. So sorry if that's a bit of me on my soapbox, but that's what I've been up to, boys.
Martin, I'd just like to add to that. On a positive note, we're radio amateurs. We don't get paid for this, and we do it for fun. And everyone's got their own interests in the hobby, and we should just get on. And that's and help new radio amateurs coming up through the ranks. I think that's the most important thing.
Or help anybody who's interested in radio come up through the ranks.
Absolutely,
listener or whatever. It doesn't matter. If they're interested, let's help them.
Correct.
As people. Okay. Well, I'd like to thank each and every one of you. Now I've got off my soapbox. So I'd like to thank you, Leslie, and Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB for joining us tonight.
Martin, it's been a pleasure. Some really interesting conversations tonight, and thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure, Leslie. No problems. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU.
Well, thanks for having me as always.
Yeah, thanks, Dan, for joining. I'd like to thank Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MMG.
What kind of sad individuals muck about with PMR 446, I wonder. Thank you for having me on, Martin. It's been a pleasure. Happy New Year.
Yeah, and if I know you're joking. I know you're joking because I've seen you.
He's the wind-up.
I know he's winding me up. But, yeah.
I am winding you up. 500 milliwatts. Yeah, 500 milliwatts FM on UHF. It's a great little license-free band to muck about with, and if you have fun on there, just think what you could do with an amateur license on 70 centimetres.
Yeah, correct. And I'd also like to thank Ruth Willet, KM4LAO, for joining us, Ruth. Great to have you join us this first show of 2021. There you go.
Thank you. It's been great being on, and Happy New Year to everybody.
Yeah, Happy New Year to all the presenters and all of our listeners. I'll say 73 to you guys now, and we'll continue with the podcast. 73.
Cheerio.
73.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. We start off with news here in Austria, where they've got a New Year gift of access on secondary allocation to two bands. First is the 60 meter 5 megahertz band, which they've been given an allocation of 5351.5 to 5366.5 kilohertz at 15 watts EIRP. Secondary allocation is at 630 meters and this allocation is between 472 and 479 kilohertz, and that's 1 watt EIRP as well. So say good luck to the Austrian amateurs and for your new access for 2021. Moving now across the border in Switzerland, a special event for you throughout the course of 2021. To celebrate the 40th anniversary of the International Police Association Club of Switzerland, they're going to be activating a special event call sign HB40 Police, activated throughout, say, the whole of 2021. Activity will be on 160 to 6 meters and frequently on VHF, UHF and SAFH. So they've got some QSLs that are going to be available from the Bureau or from EQSL. Keep an ear out for that one there. It's also valid for the Matterhorn Award as well. So if you're chasing that award this year, keep an ear out for that one there. Well, on the back of much news about some of the ham radio events that have bitten the dust during these times, we've got news here of HamCom after 41 years. This event that takes place in Texas unfortunately has now closed due to rising costs and the COVID pandemic basically bringing an end to the show. So the president, Bill Nielsen, AB5 Quebec Zulu, says the decision was not made lightly, but the safety and wellness of our volunteers, vendors, clubs, presenters and attendees is paramount concern. He'd like to thank everybody that took part in the previous events, and as I say, I'm sure now that'll be greatly missed in the Texas area. So that's HamCon is closing now after 41 years. Well, now join me for this episode's feature where we discuss your questions and hopefully come up with some answers for them in this episode's feature. Hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
Well, as Happy New Year to you all, guys, and we start our first feature of 2021 with a roundup of some of the interesting listener questions that we've received over the past few weeks. As a plan to be done in the last episode, but obviously we covered the RSGB Get On The Air to Care campaign for Christmas, so we're picking up your questions this episode. So I'm joined by my second half of colleagues. You've listened to the first half of our colleagues in the News Roundtable. So we've got Ed Durant, DD5 Lima Papa from Germany, Martin Rothwell, Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima, Frank, Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, Bill Barnes, Whiskey Charlie 3 Bravo, and returning for this section is Martin M1 MLB. So guys, thanks a lot for joining us for this listener feature. And let's start with our first question. Came in from Dino Papas, and Dino's call sign is Kilo Lima 0 Sierra. And Dino's a long-time listener, supporter of the show, so it's great to get his question here to the show. So he says, over the past few years, our club has made a concerted effort to recruit, train, license and retain YLs. From just a handful, our female club members, we are now well north of 20, with a number of them having moved up to the extra class licenses. Becoming VEs, install both VHF and HF stations at their homes, and learn to solder and build projects as well. Ages range from 9 to 90, should I say. We're always looking for good ideas how to improve our program, as it's refreshing to hear our YLs during our weekly 2-meter net holding their own as real hams. Any comments on how your organisations have perhaps put effort into this? Many thanks, 73s from Dino, as a Kilo Lima 0 Sierra. So I tell you what we'll do, we'll pop this over, it's Dino's in the States, we'll pop this over to Frank first. And Frank, I suppose it'd be interesting to know about the experiences in your part of the world. It's the Delta region, isn't it? And what you're doing there for the YLs in the hobby.
Well, Dino's question, and let me just say, we know Dino Papas fairly well, and he's just such a terrific and positive amateur radio operator for all that he does. So I'm not surprised that he offered this question. One of the ways to effectively deal with this is to understand that for young ladies or XYLs, as the case may be, you're trying to interest them into a group of which they are an extreme demographic minority. So you have to think about it. What if, and I'll step on all kind of gender norms here. Let's just say that women may knit things more than men. I don't know if that's true. I think it's true, but I don't know that's true. And you're a guy, and you're kind of invited to come to a 95% female group and learn something called knitting. How would you feel about that? What would be the issues that you might have? And that may seem far-fetched, but there's a very simple and fundamental element of the barriers that many women feel about getting into amateur radio. Men tend to not understand the fact that they are in an extreme minority. So that's point number one. Number two, we have a cultural burden in that we tend to do what's called mansplaining a lot. If you're a woman and you're speaking, men tend to interrupt and they're going to tell you, where you're wrong. That's a huge, huge turnoff. It is for men when men are cut off. So understanding, giving women some empowerment to participate in amateur radio groups requires the rank and file man to understand that and to make places for them. Now, the third thing is, we'll get one woman and put her on the board, or we'll get one woman and let her do something. And that's what we'd call tokenism. So women see that coming. Now, it is a start. So the kinds of things that I would say to Dino is to think about organizational aspects of clubs and how you do things rather than personal aspect. Don't make it about a given woman or a given man, but how the collectivity operate. Now, some podcast listeners have heard me talk a bit about this. What's the most common cultural crossroads, at least in the United States, for women and young people? Two groups we say we want in our hobby much more than they are now. It's public libraries. So where do you try to recruit women from? Libraries are where you're going to hit the most. So those are three or four things that I would say, Colin, in response to Dino and any others who are listening who are concerned about this, is think about those aspects of trying to recruit women, because you may have much more success. You think about how you're approaching the problem and then how to reach that audience.
So we're keeping this in the States it's a bill in Pennsylvania. Does that ring true, what Frank's saying, or is there other tactics being used further north?
I generally agree with what Frank's saying. The groups around the area here that I'm aware of are not having as much success as one would hope. However, the thing I can say from the folks I'm aware of, and I'm thinking of about 4 or 5 clubs that I'm aware of, not actually members of all of them, but they all have ladies participating. And in general, if I was to describe their participation, it is exactly the same things that bring everybody else into the hobby. We got a few folks that want to focus on emergency communications. There's a few folks that focus on contesting. A few folks that seem to focus on DX chasing. A few folks that seem to focus on the social aspects of it, like rag chewing and that kind of stuff. So I think what he's doing with his club is good, and he should continue that. Likewise, he should probably jot down some notes on lessons learned to be able to share it with others. Because like I said, I am aware of YLs in various clubs around here, but it's nowhere near as many as that he's reporting in his club, which is great. But I will always double second, triple second, however you want to phrase it, what Frank's saying. In most communities around here, the public library is a nexus point for people to, get together, meet, common interests, that kind of stuff. So definitely don't forget your local library, at least if you're trying to market to people to get more people in the hobby.
So Ed, I'm very interested to know what the demographics like in Germany, and what things might be different there, obviously with a different language or different culture compared to what Dino's experienced?
Yeah, I think of the two clubs that I've been to in Germany, just visited for a couple of weeks, a couple of meetings, if there's been YLs there, it's usually been the ex-YL of an amateur come along just to support the man. So I think it's actually quite a big problem getting young ladies or ladies in general into the hobby in Germany. I was going to suggest that, especially as Dino's managed to get more than 20 YLs into the club that he's part of, that maybe they should be equally represented on the executive committee. But Frank, you were saying that that's sort of not everything, and I'm thinking that's right as well. Yes, they should be equally represented, but the other thing I'm thinking of now is something that I heard and stuck in my mind from the youth on the air, or the youngsters on the air group, where they've come back and said, let us get on, give us support, but let us get on in our own group to do what we want to do. So if you've got 20 YLs in the radio club, then empower them to do whatever they want to do within the hobby, and sort of let them have the reins of their section of the club, if you like, but always with the point that if they need support or if they need advice, then the other members are there, or also other members may come to them to seek advice, depending on, what they're doing and what's interesting. So that sounds rather like I'm separating the club into two parts, male and female. That's not the intent, but maybe the way that a group of women like to have a club is different to the way that men do, and try and support that difference.
So I suppose let's swing this round now to the UK. Dad, thoughts from your side of things? I know you've done a lot to promote youngsters into the hobby and really open up to as many people as possible. What more can we do to attract and retain ladies in the hobby?
Okay, well, I was listening with intent on what the boys said. I'm going to say something that Frank will probably disagree with initially, but you mentioned the token woman. Under no circumstances do I ever want anybody to think that Ruth is the token woman presenter on the podcast. Ruth is here through her own ability. She's actually a far better operator than ever I am. And guys, it took, and I'm talking to the general public here, it took us ages to find a young lady that was able to have her own say and had her own mind. Ruth speaks her mind. We don't clip her wings or anything like that. Prior to that, we were very much trying to say, well, let's see if we can involve ladies in the hobby. There are a number in the hobby. And it was very much along the lines of, every time I spoke to a lady that was probably good enough to be on the podcast, she had an amateur husband who sat behind her trying to tell her what she could and couldn't say. And that, I think, really irked me for a long time. And in fairness, I'm really pleased we've got Ruth, because Ruth is able to bring the other perspective, and she's treated as an equal on the podcast, and we work that way. And that's the other thing, treat ladies the same as you'd like to be treated yourself. Don't put them up on a pedestal. They don't necessarily want to be put up on a pedestal. They want to be involved. They don't want to be treated like the little woman, which is, they want to roll their sleeves up. They want to soldier. They want to get their hands dirty. Yeah, we should, involve them. And the other thing that I will say is places like Cyprus. Now, I'm going to the Pathos Club. There are lady members of the Pathos Club. But also, the wives go along and support. They go along and support their husbands, and they have their own little meeting. But they do a lot of social things together. So it's not only the amateur radio boys that get together, the wives get together on the same evening. And, there are a lot of ladies around this hobby that are supportive of our hobby, Mrs. B being one. She'll never get a license. She has no interest in getting a license. She'll talk to you quite happily at a rally. She'll converse with you. But chance of me getting her to get a license is zero, because I wouldn't force her into getting one. And another lady, which I will mention, and I'll be perfectly honest, is Scott McDonald's wife, Sarah. Lovely lady, very supportive of what he does. And she'll go to rallies, and she's been to events that we've been to. And, I don't believe Sarah will ever get a license, but she enjoys just seeing the technology and what's going on. So I think where we are, Dino's done a great job. Do we single ladies out specifically? I'm not sure that's the right answer, boys. And I know I'm being completely different to everybody else, but I'm really not sure it's the answer. I think we should make them equals.
Martin, let me just dovetail real briefly. You and I are not saying different things. Let me use one word that's kind of the social science word, and if you delve into feminist circles, you'll find this. Simply give women agency, the power to define their own existence and their future, period.
Empower.
Yeah, and agency is kind of the technical academic term, Ed, for that. So we're saying the same thing.
I think sometimes as well we have to look at other hobbies.
Yeah.
For example, you could argue sporting stadiums 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago were massively male-dominated and not for families and not for ladies, etc. And what we've done is we've slightly toned them down, if you like, so the fact that ladies and children feel comfortable in that environment. So it is about not necessarily putting people up on pedestal, but being a lot more welcoming and a lot more open to the people coming into our hobby. I remember this a lot, and Dad and Ed will remember this, but we were very lucky when we were in Dayton, Ohio a couple of years ago now to go to the National Museum for the US Air Force. And there was a guy doing a tour around, and he used a great line when he bumped into somebody that had flown an aeroplane or a helicopter in the past for their service days. And he said, "Tell me your story." And then he'd just keep quiet, and he'd let the person express themselves. And I think that's the biggest thing that we can do for any new interest in the hobby, no matter of age or gender or sexuality, it would be, tell me your story, and then be quiet and listen. And I think that really would allow us to bring more and more of these people into the hobby, and support them and to understand them. As you say, it gets rid of then the mansplaining and the over male dominance of the hobby, etc., and would allow more in from there. And I think from there, because certainly the manufacturers aren't making pink rigs and things like that. They're still selling black rigs, if you like, for want of a better term. So as the people in the hobby, we just need to invite them in and to offer guidance and support like we would anybody else, but at the same time offer the same support and guidance like we would to anybody else at the same time.
Here.
Here. Thank you. Right. Okay. I think we've done it. Gina, thanks for that there. I think it's a very great question. It's all about that whole thing of retaining and bringing new people into the hobby, no matter from what group we come from. So very much appreciate your question for now.
Let me just add thanks to Dino Pappas for continuing to support the podcast.
Here. And certainly his support and support from listeners like him as they keep us going well into our 12th year. So I really do appreciate that. Okay, next question here. Ian McCallum, Mike 0 India Mike Charlie. So he says hand grenade warning coming. So he says in the US, the radio regulator can revoke someone's amateur radio license if they're convicted of a felony. Should Ofcom have the same powers here in the UK, and what convictions should they cover? So first off, I'm just going to double check with my American colleagues. Is this correct that in the US you can have your license revoked if you're convicted of a felony? Is that correct?
I believe so. Bill, what do you think?
Yes.
Okay, and is there a certain level of felony that equates to?
Well, there are different classes of felonies, but Bill, as I recall, that's a self. You pretty much are asked that, I think, if you ever been convicted of a felony. I don't think it's delineated.
Yeah, it's just on the form, yes or no. I don't think they actually ask what.
If you've been convicted of one, you know it.
But I think the question from the listeners is, if you already have an amateur radio license and you're convicted, can it be taken away from you? Rather than, are you allowed to apply for a license if you have a felony?
Yeah, I'm aware of one during renewal where the amateur was not able to renew his license because he was convicted of a felony between the time he was licensed and his renewal. But I'm not sure if they actually look for it.
That'd be where the current FCC system would catch that. Now, there might be some celebrated cases. You know, we recently had a huge explosion in the city of Nashville, and it was by someone who was labeled as an IT person or a technologist and whatever. And I immediately looked his name up in the FCC database. I said, I hope he's not a ham radio operator. And he was not. Mm-hmm. So where it would be caught would be at that renewal point, I believe.
So then I suppose let's pop this over to our UK guys here, the two Martins. I suppose the question is does a conviction make you unsuitable to hold an amateur radio license? And if so, what convictions would potentially raise the problem?
I don't know mine. I'll go first on this one. I really don't know, Colin. Are you bringing a hobby into disrepute? Possibly. But then it's a hobby, so why could you? I think if you were caught using your radio amateur license to create felonies, well, then I think it wouldn't be a bad thing. If you were convicted of a felony that had nothing to do with amateur radio and amateur radio was not involved, then I don't see what the problem is, quite honestly. And maybe I'm just taking it a bit. Amateur radio is a hobby. How can you stop somebody in a hobby? All you're going to do is create a pirate, effectively. Or, the only way I think it can happen is if you're using amateur radio for ill gains. So I don't know what you think on that one.
Well, I'm just looking at this and you're thinking, they say in the US, the regulator has these powers. Is there any details on how often they utilize these powers? But the other thing is, should Ofcom have these powers? How do you know they don't? Now, I'd have thought that they have the right to revoke any license for any reason. Now, if they revoke your license for whatever reason, they would need to tell you. And I would imagine that there is a right to appeal that. We know that they will revoke a license if perhaps you are caught operating outside of the terms of it, if you are causing willful interference, you've refused to check your station over to help people, whatever. I know they have the right to do that. Surely they could do this if you were convicted of a felony, if they wanted to. Whether they do or not, I don't know. But equally, if you've been convicted of something and you're the kind of person that would perhaps do something illegal anyway and your license gets revoked, do you really care that you haven't got the license in the first place?
And the other thing is, Ofcom have prosecuted very few people in the last 10 years. I think it's a nice round figure from what I remember.
I have that feeling as well. There was a Freedom of Information Act someone put into them not so long ago requesting information regarding people running excessive power on the CB and their prosecution rates. And the reply was interesting, let's put it that way. So I'm not going to go into it, but the information is available online. It's quite an interesting response from Ofcom.
I wonder if maybe the query should be maybe slightly different. So rather than you trying to revoke somebody's license, because they're only going to end up being a pirate anyway, and the dealers, etc., have no requirement to take down your details when they sell you a rig, or you could just make something yourself anyway. Whether or not it's more about disqualifying certain people for certain things away from, say, emergency communications, or from offices in a club, and from that line, maybe is that where we need to protect the hobby more, about maybe the more sensitive parts of operating in the hobby?
But surely the clubs can step up if they say someone has been convicted of something. The clubs have the right to be able to find that out. If you're going to hold an office position in a club, the club would, common sense would dictate they would do a DBS or CRB check to check this sort of thing, and then it would be down to them as a club to decide. would Ofcom necessarily even know if someone was convicted of something? Would Ofcom immediately be informed? What would be the reason for the police, the courts, whoever, to tell them?
I think it's difficult because you and I, let's be honest, I'm going to throw the hand grenade in the room. You and I are skating around this because we know of somebody who did get convicted a couple of years ago, and I'm not going any further than that. The person would have been asked to leave the club. The person decided not to renew his membership at the end of the year, which was only about 2 months after he was convicted. So it ended amicably for the club, but probably would have been a difficult one and did put us in a little bit of a difficult situation for a while.
But as far as you're aware, though, the amateur still has a license. Yeah. I know the story, obviously, and we won't mention any more on the show. But as I say, I think it's very hard to remove a license because you can't necessarily remove the knowledge either. I mean, it's a bit the same way. You get prosecuted for drink driving or DUI, I think, as you mentioned, caught in the States. Still doesn't remove away your knowledge to drive a car. I mean, you shouldn't do it, and obviously you're banned from driving, but it doesn't stop you driving.
But you could catch someone driving, then you'd be driving while disqualified. The only way you could enforce that would be to catch them operating their radio. Now, okay, you could say, well, we heard your call sign on air, but you get enough pirates on the air. There's nothing to stop them making something up had you know it's them, unless you're going to go and sit near their house and have a listen to see if they're transmitting. But then again, they could be on a handheld, they could be in a car, they could be on the top of a hill somewhere, they could be around their friend's house. How do you know?
Yeah.
Radio is a very, very difficult thing to police.
It was just having a moment and just is shouting out the wrong call sign because for some reason they've just upgraded whether it be and they're shouting out the wrong call sign and then you think it's the person that's technically disqualified. I mean, there's 1,000 ways with this one, as you say. Ed, just out of interest, is there anything similar to this in Germany at all, or that you know?
I have to say I don't know. However, the difference in Germany is that the BNet is actually part of the government, where Ofcom is a subcontractor to the UK government. So the situation is a little bit different. For example, band plans here are a legal requirement. They're not optional because it's registered through the government offices. So it would not surprise me if BNet had the ability to remove an amateur radio operator's license because they are a government department and government departments can do that kind of thing. Which brings me back to when I got my license back in the 70s. And I know on that form there was a question, have you been convicted of a criminal offence? And if you had answered yes there was a good chance you would not get a license. Now, that's not taking the license away from you, but at that time, the amateur radio operators answered into the Home Office, into the government, not they weren't sort of just through an agency. It was actually the same as the police answered into the Home Office, amateur radio answered into the Home Office. So again, when it's going directly to a government department, I suspect it would be possible to remove somebody's license if they've been found guilty of a criminal offence. Have I heard of it happening here in Germany? No. Could it? I think yes. It could if it was thought right by the authorities.
And I suppose then, just to swing that back round now to the States, Bill and Frank, have you heard of anybody that's ever lost their license because of a felony conviction?
I can't quote the thing, but yes, I have. And part of it, and Bill, you may remember this, there was a couple of license holders who violated, Part 97, I mean, for various things. And they disputed it, and it litigated through a year or two or three or four or five, and they finally had their license quelled or rescinded. Now, that was violating Part 97. That was not a felonious conviction. But as you have the phrase wars and rumors of wars, I guess I've heard legitimate rumors of that happening, but I'll throw it over to you, Bill.
Yeah, I'm aware of one. And like I said, it was during renewal time. Just for a little background on the states, I did look it up quick. The felony question, which is, number 28 on the 605 form, that actually didn't start till September 7th, 2017. And basically, if you respond yes to the question, which let me pull up the question. This item enables the FCC to determine whether the applicant is eligible under FCC Rules 310D and 308B of the Communications Act of 1934 as amended to hold or have ownership interest in a station license. Applicants are required to answer this question only if they're filling out Form 605 for the following purposes: new amendments, modifications, renewals only, or renewals and modifications. And the answers have changed from those previously provided. And that goes on with a lot more detail about how you can submit documentation. The interesting to me part is the reason that they claimed here in 2017 that they're asking this is because all felonies are serious crimes. So any conviction provides an indication of the applicant's or licensee's propensity to obey the law. So it's probably good that we're doing that now, asking the question.
Yeah, so I suppose what we're at on this one is the fact is that it's one of them ones where I suppose potentially it could be useful, but it's probably very hard to enforce and is very rarely done, and I'm sure will generate extra cost, and who pays for that as well. So could be open, but a good discussion point there, Ian, and really do appreciate it. Well, let's get back onto some more technical side of things. Ian, fair play to you. You've come up with a couple of questions here on this little rundown, so we really do appreciate it. He refers back to a couple of episodes ago. We did a review on the Tiny Spectrum Analyzer, and he said, would it be beneficial for giving a ballpark figure of IMD and harmonics if used on a transmitter or amplifier with proper attenuation? So, Dad, you did that feature. What did you think?
Well, in fairness, I think it's a great little device. There are better on the market if you've got a deeper pocket. Certainly, you can see harmonics. That's very easy to see on the little analyzer. The intermod distortion, I'm not sure. I haven't even thought about that or to try it. But I would have thought intermod would be quite weak. And I'm not sure whether it would actually pick it up. What do you think, Frank?
Well, just for our listeners, and I thought your review was excellent, Martin, because I thought it was fundamental as well as practical in your discussion. IMD is basically the ratio in decibels between the power of the fundamental tones, frequency, and third order distortion products. So keep in mind, it's a third order product based on the design of the transmitter, more or less. Those who want to get in the weeds can get in the weeds, but that's a basic response on what IMD is. Now, keep in mind, irrespective of the Tiny SA, most IMD measurement requires other tools in addition to a spectrum analyzer. So back to Martin's point, you're talking about third order, third harmonic, and products that yield a third harmonic, those kind of distortion products. And when you read it in, say, QST, I'm sure when Rob Sherwood does his IMD estimates and that sort of thing, they're using much more expensive professional equipment. I have a Siglent spec analyzer, and it will do the IMD test with some built-in software. So do you want to count on it for that? No. But if you want to get a general idea, such as you've got a fairly inexpensive digital multimeter and you want to see is a battery putting out 12 volts or so, sure. Martin, that would be my response to it.
Yeah. It's a great little tool, but it will have its limitations, as you say, and it hasn't got all the bells and whistles. I'm not sure if not thought about it is the truthful answer, Ian, whether it would do IMD, but yeah.
The bigger thing is how nice are your two signal generators and the combiner that you're using in addition to the Tiny SA. Those would probably be as much or greater importance than how accurate the Tiny SA is. But there are many things out there you can read on IMD measurement too.
Yeah.
Just out of interest, Ed, how much was that tiny spectrum analyzer?
I've got to say around about £50. I can't remember now, but I think it was not over £50 anyway.
In the States, I think R&L Electronics in Hamilton, Ohio, have it at like $50 US. So,
yeah,
So,
it's silly money, isn't it, Frank? It's pocket change.
Yeah, it is.
And the beauty of it is because it's such a not a cost-effective device. What it's allowing lots of people who have never had a spectrum analyzer, like myself, who've never had one before, to dip your toe in the water, have a look at one, have a play with it, see if it's of use. You can do a lot more with the computer software if you want to run the big screen. And in fairness, the QRZ group, when I published it on QRZ, spent ages bitching about the size of the screen. Not about the product, not what it did. It's, well, my eyes can't see it. Well, it's not the problem of the machine. It's your eyes, mate. And for $50, come on, you can connect it to a computer and have a big screen. So I didn't see what the problem was.
Even a relatively small tablet will help.
Yeah. But it was just, what can I whinge about? I was sure of it. So I don't respond to it normally.
Well, let's move on to our final question here and talking about people whinging about stuff. John Sandham got in touch with us here. John's a very kind supporter of the show as well. He said he'd like to raise a discussion point with the group of something that's happened to him recently. He recently passed his UK full licence exam early in November, so congratulations, John. And he received his certificate and applied for his call sign. And the call sign he wanted was G8 Delta Victor Bravo. And he was awarded and presented the call sign. However, since getting the call sign, many people have commented and passed judgment on me for my choice. How does the group feel about this new turn of events? So we're lucky enough, John, to have a G8 on the panel, if I remember rightly. So Ed, I'm going to throw this over to you first. I suppose this is a question then. A newly licensed full licensed ham in the UK getting a G8 call sign. Is there a problem?
I don't see a problem with it. But the fact is, now that it seems that Ofcom will issue a whole different range of call signs. There was the M5s that suddenly came out, M5 2 letters and this and that. The structure of the call sign system in the UK is difficult to understand for people from outside of the UK as it is. And basically, most people go, okay, if it's a G call sign, it's an old fogey that's been on the bands for years, etc., etc. Not necessarily negative, actually, that. And my G8 call sign is G8GLM, Golf Lima Mike. It was taken back in 1974 when that was the Class B call sign, and you needed then to take the Morse test to get the full call sign of the G3 or G4 as it was at the time. Since then, with no Morse test, it's been promoted to be the full call sign as well. So any G call sign you hear is a full call. In some ways, there are certain countries that will hear G and understand it's the UK, understand it's England, and maybe don't understand 2E0 or M6, M0, whatever. So I can see why John would go for a G call sign. I think the thing we need to comment on here is rather not whether Ofcom should have issued it, because it appears they'll issue any that's available for a full call sign, as long as it's not allocated to a different class. It's more, why are people reacting against him and passing judgment on him for choosing the call sign he wanted? Yeah, that's the problem here, I think. We shouldn't be passing judgment on other people.
True.
Back to you, Colin.
Yeah, so Dad, you've experienced this, haven't you, with the M1 call sign, and people making judgments on the M1 call sign that you picked up. What's your thoughts on this?
Oh, yeah, it's not a problem. Look, in fairness, I sat the full RAE, which was the full license at the time, and then got a B license. The M1 was a B license, and if you did the 5 words a minute Morse, you could have an M5 when I passed, or if you did the 12 words a minute Morse, you could change it to an M0. I was having far too much fun on VHF and UHF, and I have to accept Morse doesn't exactly float my boat that much. I'm more happy building and repairing and fixing things and facilitating. However, Morse was given to me when the requirement was done away with. Now, it's a very difficult one. I'm happy to keep my M1 because there ain't many of us around. And in fairness, I knew an elderly gentleman who's now been a silent key for years. He was talking to me about potentially having his call sign when he passed over. And I thought long and hard about it. And I declined that option because he wanted me to have a G3 call sign, an early G3. And at the time, there were 2 reasons I didn't take it. One is people would have thought I was a pirate. And a lot of people knew this gentleman in South London, let's be honest. He was probably very, very well known. So I didn't take his call sign. The other one was, I was proud of my M1. That was mine. I'd used it for a number of years, about 4 or 5 years, and I didn't want to give that up. So whatever call sign you get, you do get protective to it. Albeit the only one I never got protective to was the one the FCC originally issued me with. And then I changed that one for a vanity call sign, as in W9ICQ. However, in the UK, we don't have vanity call signs. If the call is if the letters are available, you can ask for them, and you can usually have them if they're available. But if they're not available, they're never coming up again, unlike the States. I mean, I think I'm the 3rd or 4th person to have my call sign that I own in the States. So it's a different situation over here. And, yeah, well, I mean, the biggest problem John's going to have is if he asks a question that most people think a G8 should know, he might run into people thinking, hey, he might be a pirate and shutting the world down on him, which I hope doesn't happen. But that's the only problem I can see with it, Colin. I mean, I don't care. It's a valid call sign. Go for it.
Yeah, so Martin, I've just quickly looked up John's QRZ listing, and he's a couple of years older than you and I. Would I think anything about him having a G8 call sign? No, I just think I fully accept him as a full licensee. Would you agree?
I don't even think hearing him on air, I would even question it. Reading this, I'd initially ask why. I'm not sure why you'd initially request to be a G8 specifically, rather than the current issuing call sign numbers, which I think is still M0, unless you were taking it over a call sign from a parent or grandparent or who may have passed on, and you want to keep that alive. I get that. As Martin said, it suggests you've been licensed for much longer, considering the M0s came out around 2000-ish, I think. It may not be great if you're hoping to go on air and ask some basic questions, as you might be expected to know the answers to them. But the G8s, as I think Ed mentioned, were the B license. So that might suggest at the time that you might not have done the same level of training. And although
no, that's not true. No, the level of training on the exam was the same. The only difference was the Morse test. So and really the equivalent is the full license now. So he's got the same skill set.
Okay, so fair enough. So the only difference there is the Morse. So the only thing that I can see that anybody would say anything against that is if you're a G8 and you met someone who was at the time an A license holder. As much as I don't agree with it, that may open you to a little bit of ribbing from them, but that, I think that's pretty much it. But yeah, I don't really have anything else on that.
I think a couple of things, and if the gentleman listens, and I think he does, some years ago I worked for one of the amateur radio dealers. I'm not going to use full call signs, but mine was a B license, and he used to one of the other people in the shop used to lean across the desk and say, "You're a mere M1." And I used to say, "That's better than being a G nothing." But yeah, I don't really care. But the thing is, the B licenses did the full REE. The only thing we didn't do was Morse. And in fairness, a large proportion of the questions, as Ed will agree with me on, were Morse were A license questions. You know, you had to answer all the A license questions to get a pass. You know, there were lots of questions about Morse and that. But
yeah, you had to know everything about the HF bands and everything as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but then they didn't let you transmit on it.
Correct.
I'm a full license holder. I have an M0 call sign. The level of, and okay, nowadays your license is pretty much multiple choice, you know, or multiple guess, as we sort of say tongue in cheek. But I never had to do Morse. I couldn't. I can sort of identify generally what the local repeaters are spurting out, but I couldn't tell you specific. I don't understand Morse at all. So I don't know.
The hobby's grown. The hobby's grown, in fairness. The diehards believe Morse should be the only thing. The hobby's grown phenomenally in the last 20 years. And I've nothing against Morse. If I didn't keep falling asleep when I was trying to learn it, I'd have learnt it by now. But in fairness, you know, there's plenty in this hobby for everybody. And whether you've done Morse or not is immaterial these days. You know, you don't have to do it for your license. So it's just, if you do Morse because you want to do it, that's fine. Nobody's going to give you grief over it. But no different to if you want to do FT8. You know, we've been known for having a giggle about FT8. But we could have equally had the same giggle over Morse. We could have the same giggle over slow scan TV. You know, it's what you want to do in a hobby.
Martin, we're a lot like Donkey Cody, just tilting at windmills that we've created.
Yeah. So are we interpreting the message or the question from John that the other amateurs, are getting at him because he got G8 rather than G3, or because he got G rather than M?
Yeah, I'd say it's G rather than M, because there have been times, and I've seen this in various sites in the UK, that someone with a G call sign has the air of somebody who's maybe more experienced. Might be the nice way of putting it. And I think it goes back to our first
old
question.
fogey.
Could be, but I think
Stop picking on Leslie.
Yeah, please.
Hang on, I think I'm older than he is.
But you know what? I think this goes back to our first question in some respects, doesn't it? The fact is that it's about removing the barriers and everybody enjoying the bits they enjoy, the hobbies, etc. type of thing. And I think this is the problem with the G call sign is that there is it's not a stigma, is not the right word, but there is a perception about a G call sign. You're probably in your 70s, 80s sort of thing. You've been around, you fixed your tube radios, etc. sort of thing, you know. You don't touch this digital stuff because it's weird fangled dark arts, because it's not proper radio and that sort of stuff. And then you get someone like John, and John's QRZ profile says he's in his 50s. You know, so he's probably 20 years south of a lot of that type of mindset of people. And as I say, he's probably not fitting that right bracket. And this goes back to our first question, where we said the fact it's about removing the barriers and letting people enjoy the hobby the way they want to enjoy it, rather than stigmatise and put people into boxes and onto their various pedestals, saying, well, you're a G8, so you must be 75, 80, and you must still have a tube radio and all the rest of it. No, it doesn't matter. This is a completely different guy. It's just it's call signs available, and maybe it's just call sign snobbery, for want of a better term.
I can also tell you that there are a lot of G3s I've spoken to, and G4s, G0s, you know, who are in their 80s and 90s, and they're as bright as a button, and they know more than me, and they do some of the clever stuff. They use some very clever stuff. So we have to be very careful on ageism, guys, because it's not the age barrier that causes the problem. I just think that, you know, it's envy. I think the whole thing about this is it's turned into an envy. He's got a G. I would have loved to have had a G. He's got one. I haven't. I'm going to sulk.
It's the same thing that happened when somebody got some M5 call signs, that everybody was getting at them because they hadn't got them and they can't change.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got the standard, whatever it was at the time, M7 or M0 or whatever, and somebody else came along just at the right time when Ofcom decided they would reissue or issue from a block they hadn't used before. And then, yeah, you got some snide remarks about that as well. That's right. So, I mean, the other thing I'll just throw in the pot at the end of this is, have you ever seen a world amateur radio map with anything apart from G shown for the UK on it? They just don't publish M or 2 on or anything on them. They're always only G.
I've seen it with an M, but not with 2.
Yeah, have you? Oh, okay. Because I actually sent the printers once in America that were making these a note and said, you do realise that call signs have changed in the last 20 years, and maybe you should be including the others. But even now, new ones on websites and things you can buy, they've often only got G, GM, GI, and so on.
Yeah, that's true.
Martin, let me put a capstone on this a little bit. There's two things. We have a hobby that embraces tradition. In principle, who can be against tradition? But when we make it an extreme orientation, that we become fossilized, and it's resistant to change. I'm going to say this in code because I don't want to name the person's name. The most famous ham in the state of Mississippi lives just a few miles from me. You don't have to do any math to figure out who it is.
I thought you was the most famous ham in Mississippi.
Absolutely not. Far from it. Even though I'm pleased to be on this podcast, all you have to do is think for a little bit, and Bill already knows who I'm talking about. He was a no-code technician licensee. The local big club, much bigger then than it is today, snubbed him, told him they didn't want any no-code techs. Now, he had already been in broadcasting and done radio professionally for a number of years. They would love to have him be a member today, but that'll never happen because of that fossilized culture that we're talking about and that snobbery. So it's sad in many ways.
But it does come back to we, as a hobby, need to treat people. And this one of the beauties of the Sutton and Sheen Club, and I can't work out. Well, I know why it happened, but we've had an ethos for the last 15, 18 years of everybody's equal. You walk through the door. I don't care whether you're a CB, a PMR 446 license-free person, a shortwave listener, an amateur of whatever license. If you're interested in radio, you come through the door. You're treated as an equal, and you can ask any question you want, and we'll answer it if we can. Sometimes you'll provoke a deep discussion. That's good also. But it really is. I think we have to be at a stage where, let's not get snobbery about it. It's some things I find easy, others don't, and some things others find easy, I find very difficult.
Because, Mark, some of those people might turn out to be heroes.
Yeah.
That's a hint, people.
Yeah.
I do want to tail on here to something that Colin said briefly, if I may. John, I pulled up your QRZ page. Please, man, just ignore the haters. You get someone giving you a hard time. I mean, I haven't run into this in 29 years, but the game plan back in the day was someone started giving me a hard time. I'm just like 7-3's got to go and just move on. Because I have no time for haters, and you shouldn't either.
There is a bad space to go to.
Exactly. And the other thing too is on his QRZ page, he has in there that his normal career is a platform systems engineer, linear encoding, compression multiplexing, which explains why he picked the call letters he picked. If you can do that, man, you're sharp as a nail. So don't let anyone ever give you any kind of slack for that, man. You know your stuff. You earned it.
I wonder if John was the first person in recent times to get a G8 call. Maybe that's why he's getting all the not so nice comments. But once, 5 or 6 other people get G8s, maybe things will calm down a bit, hopefully.
Fingers crossed. But as Bill says, yeah, there's plenty of positives out there, so don't let them hate. And I tell you what, John, hopefully we'll have Hamfest back on in 2021, and feel free to catch us at Newark maybe later on in the year in September time, and we'll make sure Martin's had 2 cups of coffee, and then we'll send you off to buy him a third, and you can take responsibility from there. And we'll all laugh as we set up. No, but feel free to catch us when I say somewhere like that, and we'll certainly introduce you to the more positive sides of the hobby. No problems at all. Right, well, I'm going to wrap this up then. So I'm going to thank my colleagues for taking part and answering your questions this episode. So we've had Ed Durant, DD5 Lima Papa, Martin Rothwell, Mike 0, Sierra Golf Lima, Frank Howell, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, Bill Barnes, Whiskey Charlie 3 Bravo, and Martin Butler, M1 MRB. So thanks a lot, guys, and Happy New Year to everybody. And as I say, thanks a lot for answering our listeners' queries.
Yeah, 73, guys.
73. The ICQ Podcast. Getting it said for amateur radio.
Well, everybody, I really hope you enjoyed our discussion on some of the questions we've received from our listeners over the last few weeks. That was some of the ones we picked out we thought would generate the best discussion. Some others we've replied back to directly. So as always, guys, great to hear your thoughts and feelings about what's going on in the hobby. And I hope we've generated lots of thoughts. And I think that was a little bit of lively debate there from the team.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed both of the chats. In the news roundtable was always great fun, but it was also nice to sit down with the other guys and have a chat this year for the first show of 2021. So yeah, great fun, and I think we got something out of it.
Yeah, and a lovely bumper show to start the new year with, guys. So I really hope you enjoy our show, as I say, as we start 2021. Well, some of the listeners who enjoyed the show and keep us advert free, obviously, are our monthly subscription donors. And we'd also like to thank Dave Pyle, Kilo Whiskey 1, Delta X-Ray, and Walter Washburn, Kilo Tango 0 Delta. Washburn, that is, sorry. Really appreciate your support of the ICQ podcast. And you can, continue to show your value to the show by visiting icqpodcast.com/donate. Was whatever value you find in the show, you send our way, and it keeps us advert free. We'd also like to thank all the well wishers. I said in the Christmas and New Year messages as well we received. Thank you very much. Far too many to detail here, and I really do appreciate that feedback from everybody there. So thank you very much for that there. I need to also thank Leslie Golf 0 Charlie India Bravo, Dan Kilo Bravo 6 November Youthful, Edmund, Mike 0, Mike November Golf, and Ruth, Kilo Mike 4, Lima Alpha Oscar for taking part in the news roundtable with us, and we really do appreciate the guys taking on board us on there. Right then, I think that just about wraps up most of our bits and pieces in there. Just want to check in with yourself, just make sure there's nothing else we need to cover, as I say, before we wrap up the first show of 2021.
Yeah, nothing really, Colin. I think we'll carry on throughout 2021, trying to bring you interesting content and keeping you updated. And hopefully we'll still be here next year, I would suggest, Colin.
Oh, we'll give it a go. Won't we? So now we just obviously, for the first time for 2021, we need to make Mrs. B a cup of tea, and maybe also find a fine biscuit or maybe a leftover treat from the Christmas box to serve with that cup of tea.
We certainly will. I'm going to make Mrs. B a cup of tea in a minute. I've got a nod from the other end of the room, so that's a definite must do that, and I'll see what else I can find. So, that'll all be good, Colin.
Wonderful, no problem. So we'll 73 Zil, and we'll catch up again in a fortnight time. 73 Zil.
Yeah, 73.